Alright, uh, so this would be part 2 of Ishtova S.O.S. So yeah, Ishtova S.O.S. part 2, I hope you enjoy it. Seaside Vineyards. Her instincts told her she would find the point of greatest destruction there. And your soothsights told her she was heading in the right direction. All around her, tall oaks had fallen over. Some were snapped in the middle as if lightning had struck them. Others were uprooted completely. She was getting closer. The incline increased as she approached a barren set of knolls. She would have thought nothing of them if it weren't for a sign that read, "Welcome, Seaside Vines." So this is where the Mendota get its fine assortment of wines. What a shame. If the vineyards had been something to see, they weren't any more. Once over the first hills, the land was scarred. Deep fissures bore into the hillside, splitting knolls in two, creating crevices wide enough to swallow centurion oaks 7 at a time. The scion's work. Bibi had seen destruction like it before, but she could never grow accustomed to tragedy. Not like a few of her peers could, and did. She never calloused. Each wound burned as brightly as the last, and in her 6 years serving in the Mendocian army she had seen more carnage than even her father could boast. Not that she ever would. The land slipped by, a torrent of weeping demise, and suddenly she was near, and the scion seemed just below her feet. It's said that when a scion is born, it has to maim the people of Mendota by taking from them the precious blood of their loved ones. You're the same one that took Bud from Father and me, aren't you? She checked her zodiac. Storm gray. Yep, the same one. The scion would be there, born from mortal despair and the bane of all mankind. The baby gray was clawing its way to the surface, and the young Mendocian was right above it. The only thing it would get was the edge of Bibi's sword. She put her sword on the ground beside her and drove both her hands into the dirt, wrenching armfuls of gravel and clay up and out of the way, one scoop at a time. Each one felt heavier than the last, but each one brought her that much closer to killing that same creature responsible for her brother's death all those years ago. It was a lingering pain. It was still fresh, alive within her beating heart, just waiting to take her down. So it didn't matter if a few of her nails bent backwards and peeled off as she dug deeper and deeper, nor did the rocks cutting away at the knees while she worked. The only thing that mattered was her duty, her revenge. She reached a layer of soil much softer than before, and finally she could see movement. The scion was so close now. A hand burst out of the ground, its fingers long, pointed twigs, its skin covered in bark and mud. A second hand emerged, as red as a brick, and together they tore at the ground, separating the scion from freedom. Bibi gripped her sword tight and readied her nerves. What happened next wouldn't be pretty. The scion rose up out of the ground, a golem of the earth. Its body was as thick as centurion oak, and though its face looked human, its eyes shone like emeralds in the dark. Every inch of its hulking mass was covered in sediment. The moment it opened its eyes, Bibi was ready. She held her sword above her head with both hands and brought it down against the baby gray's chest, easily splitting its youngling armor. Not this time, Gray. She hit the hilt of her sword with closed fists again and again until the guard was resting against the scion's bare flesh. The end result was as devastating as the scion's womb of destruction. Had its chest been a seaside village, like Ishtova, then the thick green blood running down its gut, collecting in the torn-apart earth beneath its feet, would have been shattered hovels and markets. The look in its eyes would have been the broken heart of a two-toned boy who would grow up without his parents. The scion gasped, spitting its green bile into the air as it did, and then it grew silent. In the end, he simply stared up into her eyes, a question burning in his dying gaze, understood without words. Why? Bibi clenched her teeth, bent down, and whispered into its ear. Because you kill us. In that moment, thinking of her brother and father, thinking about how proud they would have been, Bibi almost felt something like pride crawl up into her chest. I did it, Bud. I got the bastard. There was a pause as Bibi let her words sink in. And then, we killed them first. The scion gasped its last words, as if all the universe depended on it. Bibi recoiled in horror, but it was too late. A small hatch seemed to open up in the creature's chest, and behind it lay the unmistakable red hue of dynamite. That's no scion. There was a blinding flash, accompanied by utter silence, and then there was darkness. No great banquet, like all the legends promise. No anything. Darkness. I have failed you, brother. Greystorm awoke. Even though he expected death, it was his turn. But instead of death, he found 2 dead bodies, lying broken upon the earth before him. A young woman, a Mendocian warrior. Her legs were nowhere to be found. What a tragedy. The scion gazed down at her youthful face and felt a great surge of remorse. She had so much left to accomplish. He turned to regard the other. Whoever he was, he dressed very strangely. He almost looks like me. Alright, so that is part 2. I hope you enjoyed it.